flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
It's a fascinating little subplot to what they did. I thought the more egregious thing was they just didn't get enough. Okay, you're going to trade in the division and gift a good player there, but you got to get value for moving back there. I didn't think they got enough picks. Now I liked Lewis Cine, who they took when they slid back in the first round. He's a stud. I had a defensive-minded head coach who said he was his favorite player in the draft and said the guy could come in and teach our defense already. Like, he's that smart. So they got a good football player. I just think it's a different era than what we used to have.
The Kwesi slander by Daniel Jeremiah there on the Rich Eisen show.
I wouldn't call it slander. It was just an analysis of his feelings.
I thought it was slander.
I thought
it was
kick in the shin.
Well, we'll wait and we'll see, right?
Little quick jam.
Well, he's not the only one. Let's look at this article from The Athletic here. Mackie and Judd, daily Minnesota sports, entertainment, therapy, speculation. Judd's hockey show. Going to be doing a live vent line edition on the Score North YouTube channel tonight on this Tuesday night for Game 5. So definitely check that out. Hockey Whisper is going to sleep on his takes for tomorrow. But what are rival executives saying about Kwesi? And more specifically, what are they saying about the way that he handled his first draft as the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings? So there is our guy, Mike Sando, friend of the show, by the way, Mike Sando.
Yeah.
Very good, and a very, very respectable guy in the business. So, like, this is not he is the anti-hot take guy.
He is a capital J journalist guy.
Yeah.
He does the quarterback tiers every year, but almost everything he does is, I'm going to go talk to 50 executives and scouts, and then I'm just going to be a conduit. I'm going to take that information, anonymous sourcing, but that's how you get those guys to talk. So he has, I think he did this, it's an article with executives around the NFL basically gossiping and talking about all 32 teams anonymously. It's just, I mean,
I love it.
It's great.
I love
it
it.
is, yes. It's a little reckless, it's a little dangerous, but it's great reporting here. And so I have just sort of copied the entire Vikings section of this article. What are rival executives saying about the way Kwesi handled the draft? I'm just going to read through some of this. We can pause at different points and let's discuss here. The Vikings made so many unanticipated turns that the rest of the league, by the way, this is Mike Sando's setup to the article. The Vikings made so many unanticipated turns that the rest of the league is still trying to pick up the scent on Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa's first draft as general manager. Minnesota made a league-high 6 trades and even tried to trade back into areas they had vacated, according to executives who are still trying to figure out what happened. Quote from one NFL executive: "It looked like the Vikings were just trading to trade. They got some picks. Maybe it worked out. I don't know. Interesting situation." One executive suggested there might be a better balance between accumulating picks and leveraging the work that coaches and personnel people do to identify specific players who fit the organization best. This seems like a Moneyball quote, right?
I was
Oh, dang it, we're on
I
the
was
road.
just going to say the same. Kwesi, I've been scouting for 6 months, and this is the thanks I get.
I've been watching football games for 72 years. How can you throw my opinion away by trading back? Quote from an executive: "I get that in Kwesi's mind, you compare and contrast the two scenarios, and in his mind, he liked the other scenario better, meaning like, should we stay or should we trade? But you set a precedent for future trades. They already know you're an analytics guy, so you're probably going to want to trade down. And then with your first trade, you go pretty far from the traditional point system, the Jimmy Johnson draft value point system. And so it sets the tone. Maybe our first offer will always be lower because we know it's Kwesi and he will want to trade down."
I love this stuff. I don't even have like a super hot take to say I love this. Like, I love the controversy of what he went away from the draft value chart. And then I saw some comments off of this piece from Sando on Twitter about, we got the smartest guy, the Vikings do. And all right, first of all, let's take the last part first, okay? The whole thing about, well, maybe he'll get swindled every time now.
By the way, there's
now on.
way more where this came from. We will keep reading it, so just so the audience knows.
But let me just say this, okay? That is the least of my concerns because, believe it or not, people can learn and adjust and change. So, like, a year from now, Kwesi might say, I did that, learned a little bit from it, not going to again. So like, I would hope that every executive, basically in sports, that calls a fellow executive and tries to make a trade always tries to immediately win said trade, right? Like, not like, I really want to do what's best for the A's, but I work for the Twins, so I'm going to help you out. You know, I'm going to make sure. So let me be clear. This whole notion that, well, he might just always get swindled on the first. I hope he does, and then I hope he says no. It's a ridiculous notion to me, like that this now is who Kwesi is. Like he's now pigeonholed into always making this type of trade guy. I don't even get that.
Well, I do think it's fair to say, until he shows otherwise in future drafts, he loves to trade and he's open for business and he loves to trade back. Which, by the way, that is the analytically sound thing to do, because I think a lot of sort of the analytically minded smart people in football would tell you the draft is pretty much a crapshoot. Yes, there's going to be better players in the top 15 or 20 picks usually, but it gets pretty flat halfway through the first round, through the second, third rounds, and there's guys to be had in the fourth and fifth rounds. And so you'd rather just have 2 or 3 extra lottery tickets so that you have a better chance of a couple players becoming Pro Bowlers than gambling it all on trading up for this one guy that you might also whiff on.
And that's what Rick did.
Well,
Like,
we called him Trader Rick. What are we kind of mocked him and called him Trader Rick.
I know we did.
What are
but
we
I mean,
calling
Rick,
Kwesi then?
Rick's whole thing was, I'm going to get more picks because that's going to give me more of an opportunity, right? Like that was the same. Now, I think it
worked well for him.
And it probably came from a different place of thought, a little bit at least. But yeah, it was this exact same thing, which is I'm going to have 15 picks because I know if I have 15 picks, the Monday after the draft is done, I'm going to be praised up and down because the experts are going to be like, this guy's got so many picks, it must have been a good draft.
Now, of course, was it 15 picks in that one draft? He literally had 15 picks,
it
right?
set the modern day record.
But I think 8 of them were in the 6th and 7th rounds. And no, if you go back and look, I think Oli Udoh was one of those. Well, so you did get a starting right guard, but not really, because he was one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL. But I guess you can say that, look, we found a starting right guard in the 6th round. All right, let's keep going here.
All right.
What are rival executives saying behind Kwesi's back anonymously to The Athletic? This is so juicy. Looking at the picks in isolation and putting a dollar value on each of them, I have the Detroit-Minnesota trade as a win for the Vikings because my curve is pretty flat, and the Vikings got that 3rd-round pick, an executive said. Don't get me wrong, I love Jameson Williams, but it's one of those things where you just never know on the player. I agree with that. I don't know that they necessarily won the trade in value, but I do agree that you can't just assume Jameson Williams is going to be, Jamar Chase or Randy Moss or something. This is a more risky trade for the Lions than it is for the Vikings, because if they whiff and gave up draft capital, Mike Sander writes, others who agreed that Minnesota might have gotten better value on paper faulted the Vikings for failing to understand the market. Here's another executive. Analytics tell you the draft pick has value, and teams tend to underestimate the value of later picks while overestimating the value of higher picks. So if you take a trade like Kwesi did, the value was accurate on paper, but the problem is you missed the trade market because you needed to get more. Even if it was the right value on paper, you left money on the table. So he's essentially saying,
yes,
I get what the draft value trade chart says, but if you're going to trade back 20 spots and give a team a chance to move up to number 12, then you probably could have, squeezed more out of that negotiation.
Absolutely, and you have to. So I think the realistic, the biggest realistic miss was the fact that you don't swap your 2nd-round picks. Then you keep your 2nd-round pick and you get their pick. I think the ask for was definitely, we need your 2023 1st-round pick if we're going to allow you to pick at 12. And where I would say that, and so here's where I think the metrics miss the reality of sports a little bit too, is it's this one. If the Lions were right, and by the way, if I'm an opposing GM making a trade, I'm going to always assume that you're going to take a player that you think is going to 1,000% hit. So like I'm not thinking this guy's not going to be good, especially 1st round, 12th. I'm thinking this guy's going to hit. And we all are going in with that, right? Like if he busts, that's your problem, not mine. So that's where I would have, the starting point I think is 1,000%. Okay, we'll do this, but if you're right, and I'm assuming that you are, this guy's going to be good for a long time in our division. I need your first round pick in 23.
Yeah, yes, I would agree that I think you either needed the second round pick without the swap or the future first round pick, and then I would have felt. Now, I also like Lewis seems like a really good fit for this defense, and I'm fine with that. But I tend to agree with what this anonymous executive said. Another anonymous executive didn't think it mattered as much what the Vikings actually did with the picks. An evaluator thought otherwise, suggesting the Vikings accumulated a bunch of money only to purchase something cheap, essentially reaching on players they could have gotten at better price points. Another executive, I love this. This is like six executives just, hey, guess what? These guys are boneheads. Another executive wondered why the rush to bail from number 12 if what everyone had been saying about the draft was true, that it featured 14 to 16 players with first-round grades and then another 40 to 60 players who were graded more evenly. Quote, my theory is they didn't think the corner, McDuffie, was worth the 12th pick. If they thought it was a deep corner draft and thus the Booth kid and Evans can play, then the trade works for Minnesota. So mostly just like people wondering, what are they doing over there?
There's so much to unpack here, though. God, this is fun. First of all, the question is this, too. At 12, did you have a player who you clearly thought was projected, I don't care about position, as a star player? Because that's always, like, then if you're like, yeah, we did, but we didn't need that position, then don't be like, well, and the Vikings didn't, but a lot of teams are, best player. We're going to take the best player. The thing on Cine, though, that I think needs to be made extremely clear, because I think there's a lot of confusion here. The Lewis Cine pick looks like a really good pick. Like, he sounds like he could be a really quality player for a long time and possibly step into the Harrison Smith role within the next 2 years himself. The problem is not the player. The problem is not the pick. The problem is how they got to the pick. So, like, I don't want this to seem like, well, Lewis Cine, I mean, why? He plays a position that there's no question the value is not put on that position as much as certain spots for sure, because the last time I checked, safety was not considered to be a skill position, and he was taken at a very probably appropriate place. But the question is not where was he taken. The question is how did you get there?
Well, you said something at the beginning of your comment there. You said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but did they think there was someone in the 12 slot that could be a superstar player? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's how Kwesi looks at the world. I don't think he sits there and says, these 15 players are superstars, and then these 50 players are not superstars. I don't know exactly how he labels commodities, but my guess is it's a range of outcomes, right? So I'm just sort of,
I think you're right.
Riffing here, but he'll look and say, okay, these 5 players have an 80% chance of becoming star players, however you quantify that. Aiden Hutchinson and a receiver that they love and whatever, right? And then there's 10 other players that we think have like a 72 to 78% chance of becoming however they want to quantify it.
Right.
But, okay, so if we draft this player at 12, we think there's a 75% chance he becomes a star. But if we just move back to 32, the players we have in that range, maybe they're not 75%, but they're like 68%, and we can pick up an extra lottery ticket. I think that's how he views the world. It's like, he comes from the trading world, right? The financial and trading world, and that's where he was before he joined the 49ers front office and then the Browns. And, I know as much as the next guy about like investing and whatnot, but when you opt in to invest into a mutual fund or something, and it'll show you sort of the historical performance of the mutual fund and then a projection maybe of what could be. It doesn't tell you this mutual fund is going to make you rich as bleep, black and white. Like it tells you, here's how the fund has performed over the past 10 years or the past 30 years. And here's how we project the fund potentially in the next 3 years or something. And it's never 100%. This is a superstar mutual fund. So I think he views the entire world in shades of gray and percentages and probabilities. And that's probably where some of this trading came from.
Yeah, and so I think he's also definitely being. I think his strongest football advisor is Grigson, the guy who was the GM for the Colts, Ryan Grigson. And I think he definitely provides Kwesi with some guidance. But Phil, I think you're right, as I think Kwesi is going by a set of principles. And that's where I'm saying, despite the fact that what he did, I think, looks very similar to what Rick Spielman did, it comes from a very probably different thought process. But like to say that Kwesi Adolpho-Mensah is not going to probably hone how he does things is crazy, because he's a smart guy. He's going to learn. Like, he probably is doing some things that are incredibly sound, but he has never been in this job before. Like, he was always advising from his end, right? Mm-hmm. So now he is technically in charge of the whole thing. So do I think that he performed perfectly in this draft? No. Do I think he's going to take notes and learn? Absolutely. And there's probably a bit of a human element that he still doesn't totally get in how sports work, but he, I would hope, will. And then it just goes to the point too, the draft. The draft itself is a bunch of guessing. I would personally have not traded down from 12 to 32, but all of that being said, the draft, the fact that we even still use the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, for instance, and I know it's been updated through the years, but I mean, the fact that we are using the draft chart of a guy who for the last 20 years has been sitting on a yacht drinking in Miami.
he literally just posted a photo of him and Troy Aikman doing that exact thing a couple days ago. It's great.
Right. But I mean, there's got to be something between like where Kwesi is thinking and this is the Jimmy Johnson draft trade chart. You got to study it. There's got to be something in between there a little bit too.
Well, let me ask you this question and bring sort of a gray area discussion into a black or a white. And I get that this is not really a fair choice because you would get more options than this. But let's say you had two options to go back. Now that you know what the Vikings did, they traded back, and then they traded back again. Then they traded up, but they mostly just traded back to accumulate extra picks between the second and fifth rounds to play the volume game. Mm-hmm. Would you rather have, so you could stay with what they did, or you could go back and let's say instead they trade all the way up into the top 5. They give up their second round pick. Let's say they give up their second round pick and their third round pick. And so they only have one pick in the first 4 rounds. But it was Aiden Hutchinson or or Derek Stingley, whoever he was the third overall pick. What would you rather have done? Put it all on one star player, or play the volume game and have you have a handful of guys between the second and fifth rounds?
In this draft, I would take my picks. Next year's draft with quarterbacks, I would make the trade and go up top 5. So it all depends on position availability. Yeah. If I can get a quarterback, I'm going up. And if I literally, with the amount of quarterbacks available in the 2023 draft, which are going to go high, if me and my staff are like, well, yeah, but what if we're wrong? Then you're all fired. Like, if you don't think that seriously, I'll just bring Rick back. If you don't think that you can identify the right quarterback for next year, you're fired.
Would Rick come back? Do you think Rick would come back if you said, listen, it's been 4 months, Rick. We just feel like we've made a huge mistake.
Of course he'd come. Are you kidding? Again, of course he'd come back.
Has his house sold yet? Do we know?
Yeah. It's sold
gone
quickly. I think Zimmer's house sold too, but Rick's house definitely sold. But I think Zim's house was a little bit more elaborate.
Sorry. I'm always fascinated by the put your house on the market right away thing. Yeah. Is that sort of vindictive, or is it more, because it tells me that you can't wait. And listen, as a guy that I don't live in Minnesota anymore, so I can't talk, but was he mad? He's lived there for 15 years or whatever, right? His kids and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it just screw Minnesota? I'm selling my house.
No, he's rich. He probably had a place in Florida already, and if he didn't, I mean, I think he's got to be 60 something by now. So I'm sure he and his wife said,
looks good though for his age.
It looks great. Oh, and he's got the button down thing. He's got the chest hair showing. But I'm sure Rick went home and said, I've been fired. And his wife said, and he said, probably, good. Let's move to a warm weather state where we can, by the way, afford a nice house. That's the other thing. Like, Zim's got the ranch in Kentucky, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, Zim's got this huge place here. He don't really live there. I mean, he does during the season, but it's not his residence all the time. And so I think sports is such a different world. like when you work in sports, it's such a different world because a lot of times you're wealthy, you've got multiple houses, blah blah blah. So I don't think it can be seen through the prism that we would, which is, oh my God, I got fired. How am I going to pay for my small house now?
Yes. There's how can I offload one of my many assets
Exactly.
just to pare down my life. By the way, if Rick is looking for work, listen, Polka Dot Dairy is looking for drivers, right, Judd?
That's exactly right. In fact, it's Sports Dad here telling you right now, folks, you're out there, you're like, man, I got to get back to work. I got to get a job. What am I going to do? Phil just said it right there. Polka Dot Dairy looking for drivers. I'm going to give you some facts and figures here that are pretty attractive. Starting salary, $60,000.
Okay.
401k match. And the best part, no weekends. Early morning hours, so you're done early. And again, no weekends. A current CDL license is required. Polka Dot Dairy, a Minnesota-based and family-owned company with a great workplace environment. Go to polkadotdairy.com, polkadotdairy.com, and click on jobs to apply. $60,000, not too bad. No weekend, sounds good. And a 401k match, who doesn't love that in 2022? polkadotdairy.com.
Love it too. Also, listen, the weather has finally at least started to, it's been raining off and on, but 80, 90 degree weather. It means golf season is
Hell
here.
yeah.
The Meadows at Mystic, Dex.
Also, not just is a beautiful weekend for golf this weekend, Phil, it's also demo days at the Meadows at Mystic Lake. So fittings, and by appointment only, so got to go to golfthemeadows.com to book your appointment. But on Friday, TaylorMade, Ping, Titleists are coming. On Saturday, Callaway, Cobra. I love my Cobra driver. Okay, I could maybe even use another, even like a Cobra hybrid, because I need something between that driver and 5-iron. I have nothing in between there, so I'm always kind of struggling on what I can do if I'm trying to hit a par 5, and what can I do when I'm on the fairway? Well, I can go to demo days and get maybe a nice new Cobra hybrid there. Go down and check them out because it's demo days this week and it's by appointment only. And of course, it's an award-winning 18-hole golf course on Prior Lake. Golfthemeadows.com to learn more. Golfthemeadows.com to learn more.
Yeah, the final piece to Declan's golf game, that one
magic
club between the woods.
Gotta believe. He's got to believe.
gotta
You should
believe.
believe. You got to believe.
Boys, breaking news this morning. Tom Brady is set to join Fox as a lead NFL analyst, the lead NFL analyst after his career ends, whenever that may be. Maybe he's 45 and he's still playing.
So who's going to be in the booth with Burkhart in 2022 then?
I don't think they've said, right?
we know?
Is Sean
Interesting.
Payton still an option for 1 year? That would
I
make
don't-
sense,
Davis
right?
or
Sean
something?
Payton.
I don't know.
No, Charles is with CBS now, and I think Peyton
is
is
he?
close to joining somebody to do like some studio work. But I think he's very, very much known to go to be going back into coaching in 23.
Yeah. So they'd have to just kind of find someone that wants to get into broadcasting but is okay being bumped by Tom Brady in 2023 or 2030.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You don't sort of open ended. You don't really know with Tom Brady.
Yeah, and the money will be interesting. I think Tony Romo gets $20 million a year. What kind of paycheck is Tom Brady commanding?
Yeah.
This kind of came out of nowhere, too. The Fox, one of the Murdochs, whichever Murdoch is now the CEO of Fox, was on a conference call this morning, and he floated this thing, and then social media picked it up and some of the NFL reporters. But we haven't seen the terms of the contract yet. But Fox is sitting on that Joe Buck, Troy Aikman money that ESPN scooped up, right? So
Yes.
they got a bunch of salary cap space, so to speak, in the football department. But he's going to call games with Kevin Burkhardt, so that's going to be the number one team, Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady.
I like
What do you guys think? Is this going to be a disaster? Is it going to be amazing? Why does he want to do it? Just get away from the family, I guess?
That's a really good. Yeah, that's the best question. Like, he's beyond rich. He could certainly make. I mean, if the dude went to speaking engagements once a month, he'd make millions. So he must really, really be bored with the wife and kids. But that being said, I said Romo might be a disaster, and he turned out to be, especially at first, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Brady's got the personality, which he didn't really show with Patriots, but he does now. I would not say that this is going to be a disaster. And I think Brady's the type of dude who, if he sets his mind to being good at something, is probably going to be. So I'm going to do the opposite of what I did when Romo got the job. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, I think it might be pretty good. And Burkhardt, I think is going to be outstanding. I really like him as a play-by-play guy.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting just on what Brady wants to do here. And clearly, like, I think this is it. Like, I think this is the last season for him if he already has this deal in place. I don't really understand why
Drew
he would
Brees
agree to
kind of
it.
did this too, right? And
Yes.
it was like 1 year.
That's true.
Yes.
That's
I don't
true.
know. Yeah, how do you even structure this contract? And you wouldn't necessarily lock into a salary now, right? You would wait until. Wouldn't you wait 6 months to see what the landscape looks like? It's a weird deal.
And it's just strange because, like, being an analyst and, like, I know he's Tom bleeping Brady, but being the lead analyst for someone that's never done that before, like, is Tom that confident he can do it? And is Fox that confident that Tom can do it? I think
Romo, I
that's.
thought would be not good, and he was fantastic
That's
off
true.
the same question.
And Tom has done enough media stuff now. See, Breeze didn't do like the documentaries and the stuff that Tom's doing on social media, the documentary on the ESPN Plus platform that his team has produced. He's been doing so much content, and he is great on that. What is it called? Not Tom versus Time. That was the first one he did on Facebook
Man in the Arena?
Watch. Man in the Arena.
Yeah.
I mean, he's brilliant on that show because he's doing all the little, between scene cut-ins and stuff. So they've probably seen enough of him now where, okay, yeah, this dude can get in front of a camera and be pretty smooth. My question is, to what extent is he going to be critical? I don't need him to just be savaging guys up and down, but he's freaking Tom Brady, and he's going to see he's going to see flaws in young quarterbacks. And, there was one of the brilliant Monday Night Football Manning casts last year was when they brought Russell Wilson on. I think it was the first or second week of the season, and it was Raiders Ravens. It was like the first game.
Yeah.
And you had two Hall of Famers and one future Hall of Famer in Russell Wilson. And they were savaging some of the play calling down the stretch and the clock and time management and stuff. And it was great. It's like, yes, you guys can be critical and you don't have to alienate all the guys that you're talking about, but we want to hear what you would do in this situation. So that's my one thing about Brady. I don't want him to feel like, oh, I'm buddies with everyone and I love everyone and I'm never going to criticize,
I also wouldn't be surprised if we find out that there's somehow at least a little equity like in Fox that's going to Tom here. Like, I bet it's not a straight salary deal. He likes to think outside the box, to his credit, and he doesn't need. I don't think he needs a check for $20 million. Like, I'm sure he'll get a lot, but I would think that for Brady to commit to this and probably tell Fox that he was probably going to retire after 2022, I bet he's getting some type of equity stake in the company.
Yeah, I
that
have
would
no
make more
idea.
sense with Tom Brady.
I mean, he's not going to be like part of the Murdoch family, so I don't know
No, but I mean,
how that's going to work.
But he's friends with Trump, right? I mean, he's definitely so. Like, he very much could have said, "Give me a small stake." That would be more Brady-like than trying to take a straight salary.
The press release also says part of his obligations are going to be essentially working with advertisers and other like corporate business partners and stuff to try and maybe grow the pie at Fox. I don't know for sure.
It's an
But
interesting
the
hire.
pie.
super interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that Tom Brady has agreed to do something like this before. Like, I guess Peyton Manning's doing it with the Manning cast now. It's just it's a different iteration of it.
Yep.
But I love this, man. Does this get you to the Manning cast gets me to tune in to Monday Night Football more than I ordinarily would. Does Tom
Absolutely.
Brady move the needle for you guys? Does it get you to say, you know what?
It will at first.
I'm curious.
For
Yeah.
sure at first. I mean, if he stinks, it won't, but I don't think that he probably will. And so, yeah. The interesting thing about Monday Night Football for the coming season to me is this. If it's a Manning cast and now it's Buck and Aikman, which will you watch?
Oh, it's a great problem to have for everyone, right? I think it's great for ESPN. It's great for fans because I think people have. There's a novelty of like, oh, it's Buck and Aikman on Monday Night Football, but we've been listening to Buck and Aikman for 20 years.
Yeah.
So that novelty might just wear off. But those guys are far, all due respect, like the Steve Levy's and the Sean McDonoughs and some of these random. ESPN has been sort of waiting to do something like this for 10 years, right? They've been maybe longer than that. They've been trying to find. I mean, Tirico and Gruden, I think, were a pretty great pairing, and then that thing blew up, and Gruden left and got a coaching job. But yeah, Monday Night Football is much more exciting now than it was 5 years ago because of the broadcast options, for sure. You know what else is exciting? Insurance, business insurance, very exciting.
Very
Federated.
necessary too.
It is, absolutely. Federated's been around for over 100 years. They're all about helping manage risk and maximizing the success of your business. You can find a full list of industries Federated protects at federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours.